On today's episode of the CLS Experience, we have a very special treat. He's Chicago's own host of the record-setting podcast, New Mindset, Who Dis. He's a recording artist, DJ, producer, and creator of the best-selling mindfulness journal, The New Mindset. He gave birth to the dating workbook, Single is Your Superpower, and the fantastic anti-anxiety journal, Unbothered. He reinvented himself from a mindfulness expert to one of the most successful and exciting relationship and dating connoisseurs on planet Earth. His content is straight up riveting, and he's just a juggernaut in all facets of life. Please welcome the dynamic, authentic, and innovative, the mindful and self-aware Case Kenny. How you doing, Case?
That's a great intro. I like being called a connoisseur. That's nice. I'm gonna rebrand myself with that. Thank you, though. Thank you for that intro. Thanks.
My pleasure, brother. I'm glad I did good by you. It's funny because I always get a kick out of the big guest reaction, so forth, and they always get so excited. But as I always like to say, you wrote it, brother. It's your life. I just said it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's sometimes I'm so in the weeds of my life. It's fun to sometimes zoom out and be like, oh yeah, I am doing that, or I am this, or whatever it may be. But that was nice.
Yeah, and it's funny because we were chatting a little bit before we went on air, and we probably could have gone for an hour, but we wanted to save the juicy stuff for here. I know the audience loves to get a background and all that stuff. We're just gonna have an unbelievable conversation. I know you have your own show and so forth. Before we dive in, we're gonna get a little weird. You ready for me?
Oh yeah.
Case, what is your superpower?
I would say empathy.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm very empathetic myself, and I think sometimes to a fault, because with what I do with the coaching and the personal development stuff, sometimes I care so much that I bring some of that on me. It's something I'm working on. Do you ever have that problem?
Yeah, all the time. I mean, I think everyone is empathetic in a way. I think it's my superpower in the sense that I've tapped into it creatively and purpose, like that. My purpose is fueled by that empathy. My business success is fueled by it. But certainly, yeah, it's difficult, as you said, to sometimes disconnect your empathy from some of the decisions you have to make, or the energy that you give and you don't keep. So yeah, it's always a balance for sure. But for me, it's one of those things that, I have no room to ever complain, because it's a gift and a privilege to be able to have it in the first place and tap into it and just do these things that I love.
Yeah, beautifully said. Do you think there's a difference between empathy and compassion?
I think so, probably. I mean, if we go into the word, I think empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I think compassion follows. I think sometimes people can be empathetic but leave it there. But I would say so. I'd say they're very connected. That is, if you don't ignore your selfishness. Sometimes I think everyone is natural. I believe in the goodness of humanity. I think every human is wired empathetically and compassionately, and any other uplifting word we could think of. But I think then life gets in the way, our priorities, it's just tough. We're all trying to do the best we can for ourselves. Sometimes we don't carry through. But I like that way of looking at life. I'm really very anti people are selfish, never trust anyone. I don't like that vibe. I would rather believe in someone and be hurt than to live kind of cold. So I believe in all that.
Beautifully said, brother. And it's a gift and a curse, right? Because we're so empathetic and we have a heart, but I'm with you. I always look for the good in people, no matter, even if I've gotten burned, whatever the case may be. I always want to give people the benefit of the doubt, straight up.
I think that's the way to live, man. A lot of my mindfulness is derived from the question of what feels better, and not in a hedonistic, treat yourself kind of vibe, but literally you don't feel warm and compassionate towards yourself or the world when you're suspecting the worst out of everyone, when you're assuming ill intent, when you're just saying, oh, well, they'll just hurt me. It just doesn't feel good. Same. And again, we're talking about balance. I would rather be overly, wildly, delusionally optimistic and just feel good and then end up getting hurt. But I would rather live that way than be negative and then have that truth come true and be like, well, I told you so. That just doesn't seem like a good use of my time on earth, So I choose that.
Said. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is straight up gold. I'm a little bit delusionally optimistic myself. Segueing into this one, I'm excited to hear the answer for this. What's something weird about you that a lot of people might not know, Case?
I mean, I think the easy answer would be, and so I mean, if people can't see this, I'm a tall, very pale white dude. Middle class, upper middle class. Very very vanilla is what I'm trying to get at here. But I have a weird knack for, and my background educationally is in languages: Arabic, Hindi, Urdu, and Mandarin Chinese. Not many people would even think that at a glance. Not to say I'm the only, American to speak those languages or be good at them, but I've always had a knack for that. Like horrible at math, wanted to do pre-med, was not good at that in college, and decided to study those languages. So it's probably, people wouldn't expect that about me.
Yeah, I love that. I always love to find out some cool, exciting stuff that a lot of people might not know. It's funny because someone once flipped the script on me not too long ago and asked me the question I was asked. And I said that I revealed that I was actually an introvert and shy by nature, and it shocked them. So I always love to give the audience a little something they weren't expecting.
Cool. Yeah, I dig that. That's, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, a lot of times we don't display certain things, or no one knows our past like we do. So it's always good to go a layer deeper if we can.
Hell yeah. I'm excited to hear this one. I'm just curious because I've had someone on the world's greatest, and I always ask this question to kick it off, and I always get a different answer. And I want to acknowledge that depending upon what season of life you're in, obviously the answer might change. For you right now, what is your definition of success?
Cool. I like that. Chapters, man, different seasons. Like it's great that it can change. My definition of success, I'd say, I mean, honestly, my definition of success right now is freedom. I think everyone at a certain point in their life goes to get, that's kind of their definition. But for me now, just so like intuitively tapped into what I do creatively and with my business, and having come from a past where I worked 8 years at a company for someone else, now I'm just fully in my element, and my success is my freedom. It's business and money too, but it's the ability to do this. I was thinking that today. I was like, man, I could literally do anything I want today. Like, does life get any better than that? Like, not for me, not in this season of my life. Yeah. So freedom.
That's a beautiful thing. And I imagine for you, this doesn't really feel like work, because the way you show up is always so authentic and energetic and passionate. That's what it's all about. And it's funny because I used to always hear, like, when you find what you love, like, you'll never work a day in your life. And I used to be skeptical. Like,
yeah,
okay, I don't really think that exists, until I pivoted, reinvented myself, and started this season of my life. And now I get it. But like, even this right now, like, this is awesome. I'm excited to hear this conversation. We should 1 million downloads, and the listeners are going to get a lot out of it. I love this stuff, and it's obvious that you do too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I used to be the same way, man. I used to hear a statement like that. I'm like, all right, whatever. But it really is true. I think it's true. And I think it's rare. I think it is rare for people to find that. Like, I think it's tough. It's not easy to truly find it. I think some people are like, yeah, okay, this is my thing. I'm digging it. And that's great. But I think there is a group of people in life who are just like so intuitively tapped into what actually makes them happy. Not what they think makes them happy, not what they're told should make them happy, not a checklist that they borrowed and, it became their own, but like truly like pulled towards something. And yeah, I mean, I work 16 hours a day. Like, there's never an hour where I'm like not working, honestly. And it's probably a problem. I should probably chill with that. But to me, I don't look at it that way. Like, I don't, like, if I'm watching Netflix later tonight on my couch, I will have my computer open. I'll be writing some quotes. I'll be writing another chapter in my book that I'm working on. Just like always, because I want to. Yeah. And it's not like, I don't feel pressured to do it. I'm not, like, I don't have the self-control. It's just like, I genuinely love it. I want to do it. So I can't think of any stronger inclination than that.
Yeah. And what's the message for the listeners and the audience? Find what you love genuinely, and it will not feel like work. And Case and I can attest to that. I love this stuff. Yeah. This is awesome. Moving for a second, I wanted to ask you this. When you first started doing this type of stuff, you were more focused on mindfulness, and then you kind of pivoted a little bit to focus more on dating and stuff. How did that happen?
Yeah. So it's a true statement. I still consider everything I do mindfulness. Some of it's within the lens of dating. And to be honest, it's not like the most passionate thing that I love talking about. I just found that after doing, a lot of mindfulness content, people are like, "Case, this is amazing, but can you offer mindfulness advice when it relates to this area of life, namely dating, namely the area of life that is most ripe with ambiguity and frustration and lack of mindfulness?" Like, yeah, of course, like, this makes sense. So I think a lot of times when it comes to, business or content, you've got to go where people are. You got to go fishing where the fish are. And so I listen to people and they're like, we want to know how you react to ghosting or breadcrumbing or lack of self-esteem or, what the pressure to be married, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, let me apply a mindset lens to it and I will offer advice. I will never say I am a dating expert. I will never say I know exactly what you need in a relationship, but I will say, here is how I can maybe help you simplify your approach to a topic. And I think of all the things that like really helped me be successful, it is dating content, because it's such a visceral, emotional thing that everyone can relate to. Everyone has had a relationship or will have a relationship in some facet. So I think finding that like universal string, and I've been pulling on it, it's been really great. But I never set out to do dating content. I always think it's funny. In fact, I'm 33. I'm dating someone, but I've been single the last 4 years. Before that, in my 20s, I was single, not single. So it's like, I always thought it would be funny to ever give dating advice. And here I am. But again, I don't really consider it dating advice. I consider it mindfulness advice that you could apply to dating. And that's what keeps me super energized about it.
Yeah, and I like the word energized. This is awesome because it's true. Like, you're not claiming to be an expert. You just have a lot of from studying your content and so forth. And I'm a fan, and obviously preparation breeds confidence. Like, your self-awareness is on another level, and it's a beautiful thing. And I know you said 4 years ago, I think you were in a relationship or around then, and you got out of it. And I heard you say something like you started to ask yourself like really deep, powerful questions after that relationship. And it's something that I can relate to because I got out of a long relationship myself a few years back. Now I'm also dating someone and so forth. But you started to ask yourself big, powerful questions like, who are you and so forth, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for knowing the background. That's refreshing. Yeah. That was my story. I mean, I started the podcast, 4 years ago, more or less, after getting out of that relationship. That was a serious relationship. We lived together. We dated for a long time. That ended. At the time, I was also very invested in my sales job. I ran a sales team in Chicago for a advertising technology company. So when that relationship ended, I was like, oh my gosh, like, who is Case outside of a relationship? And then also I was like, man, I may as well take this opportunity to be like, who is Case outside of my career? Who's Case outside of money? Who's Case outside of sales? And I was like, I want to challenge myself. And that's where the whole podcast came from. And that's where like the challenge came from. I was like, I want to ask myself these questions. It was more of like, I need to figure out the questions to ask myself to find the answers I want. So the whole podcast was derived around the idea of question and answer, give myself a prompt, give my feedback on it. And that's how everything started. And it's funny because I always say that, the podcast is my form of therapy. I have a therapist, I go to therapy, but I've always said that the podcast is my form of therapy. And it always has been that way. You ask like how I stay so motivated. Well, it's because I love everything, but I also get a ton out of it. Like, I sit down and I talk about these topics. It's my therapy. And then, oh my gosh, it helps other people at the same time. Like, what a gift, what a privilege. But yeah, I mean, I go back to when I was, 29, and that was kind of the catalyst to like do it. And I've been doing it ever since. And that's why like life is so funny. It's like, I never set out to do this, absolutely, in any sense.
So funny, brother. The way the universe pans out. And I love what you said there. Like, the podcast is a monster hit. I mean, it's no secret that you're super successful with it, but also it fills your cup too. So, I mean, it doesn't really get better than that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the equation that I think anyone's got to figure out in life and business. Like, yeah, you could give and give and give. And I think a life of service is a life well lived. But if you're not giving yourself in some way, I think you're missing out. Like, I always say, like, my approach to mindfulness is like very self-focused, like almost selfish in a sense. And I wrote a book called Your Superpower. And the opening chapter is, why are you dating? And everyone's answers are usually like, well, I don't want to be alone, or I want to start a family, whatever. And I'm like, those are good answers, but I think you need something more focused on you. I'm dating to find someone who makes me a better person. The easiest answer. I think that is so much more compassionate and intentional, because you're saying, I need this. I want someone who could help me with it. And then of course there's reciprocity, and you're going to do the same for them. But I think life is supposed to be focused on you in a sense. Like, you can't just keep pouring. Like, you've got to know what you need, go out and find it, and then turn around and do the same for other people. But I do think some very intentional, self-focused motivation is exactly what we need in life. Sometimes it gives us direction.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because I love you, buddy. And this is great stuff. And like, this stuff, I mean, a lot of people need to hear this stuff. I know it's like a sexy topic, but it's so deep, and a lot of the stuff you talk about is what people think, but you help articulate it. For example, for instance, like I know you talk about often how people repeat the same patterns, right? It's the same relationship, but a different person. And let me be transparent. I was guilty of that for years. I was dating the same person in a different human form. I finally completely went out of my comfort zone and dated someone else, and I've never been happier. Not a coincidence. Why do so many people do this, and why can't they break the pattern?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a ton of answers to like firmly address that. I mean, I think the easiest answer would be something related to attachment styles. I'm not a big fan of putting labels on things. Like,
Yeah.
it's always funny. I do these episodes and then I'll get a message from like a clinical psychologist or a case like, that was amazing. I don't know if you know, but what you just referred to is this, that, or the other. I'm like, oh, cool. It's got a name. That's dope. But I do think the concept of attachment styles is super, super relevant. Like, I can't think of a more that is the catalyst for cycles and patterns in our lives. The conditioning that came before childhood upbringing, past relationships. I really do, now through retrospect, understand a lot of my own inclinations and habits and thinkings and where they came from. It is very valid. It's not a throwaway excuse to be like, well, I am this way because of my childhood. But it is powerful to look back to understand why we have certain behaviors. And I think that is step one always. But I also think step two is like, if we're like beating ourselves up for being like, oh my gosh, same thing over and over again. I think there's liberation in understanding. I try to say the simplest things. A pattern is a pattern until it's not a pattern anymore. Like, that's the thing with patterns that makes them so great, is you could quickly break it. A cycle is a cycle until it's not a cycle. And it's like, I think we underestimate our ability to break cycles. Like, to your point, like, it just requires you to do different. And I think that is powerful. I think about, goals in life, happiness, fulfillment, connection. I think a lot of times we think that to find those things, we need more of whatever we're doing. And a lot of times that's how we throw ourselves back into cycles, where the reality is, I think it's not more, it's different, truly. So I'll end it there. I have a lot of thoughts on those kinds of topics, like conditioning, like why do we do the things we say we're going to do?
Yep.
There's a lot to it. And especially with like connection, it surprises me sometimes how we hope that relationships will be so simple. Relationships are the most complicated thing in the world. You have two people, each with their own unique past and presence and future visions. You basically have all these variables that you're trying to align perfectly. It's no wonder it's going to be a challenge. And I think understanding the complexity that comes with it is helpful. I'm not hoping it's complex, but I think we need to realize it sometimes.
So true, buddy. This is gripping stuff. And also, what's the quote? Like, nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you're dating the same type of person and it's not working out for similar reasons, unless you want a different outcome, you have to step out of your comfort zone and be self-aware to acknowledge that the traits that you're attracting are maybe not the best fit for you.
Yeah. And I think a lot about the topic of types. Like, we all have types in life, right? And there's no denying that. I'm not saying, oh, you shouldn't have a type. But I think sometimes we need to take a step back and realize what it is in the type that we're looking for. So like, let's throw out like really softball types. Let's say you're a woman and you're like, oh, I keep dating, athletes or whatever. Like, my type is like athletes. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, no judgment. That's dope. Like, good for you. But what exactly is it about the athlete that you're attracted to? Maybe it's the money. Let's hope it's not. Let's say that it's the confidence, the sense of purpose. You find that in an athlete, right? These are the guys and girls who are devoted to their craft and they're good at it and they're obsessive with every inch and being better. Cool. Okay. Well, let's understand that you can find confidence and purpose in other people. You could find it in the dude who lives down the hall and is in an indie band and works graphic design in an ad agency. Why are we so hung up on this, that, the qualities you're looking for only come in certain packages? I think, the most compassionate and happy daters are those who date outside of the material box, the physical type box, and who know what the qualities are that they're looking for that are manifesting in different ways. That is where the most happy people I've ever seen. You hear people all the time are like, yeah, when I first met him, I didn't think he'd be my type. but that's just like a physical type. You know, you could find confidence, purpose, passion, whatever you're actually attracted to in so many different packages. And I think that is what really sets people free in relationships. And namely, that's how you escape certain patterns that you might find yourselves in.
Yeah, this is awesome stuff. And for the audience, like grab a pen, grab a journal, run that back. Like this is some real deal self-awareness stuff. And let me be clear, like I was guilty of this for a while until I realized that if I wanted a different result, I should probably take a different approach. This is awesome. I have to ask you, brother, simply put, do soulmates exist?
Yeah, absolutely. I think soulmates exist. I think soulmates exist. Absolutely. In the way that I define soulmates, I think a soulmate is someone who makes you feel a perfect kind of way. And of course, you have to define that for yourself. Back to our whole comment about being a little selfish.
Yep.
You have to understand how you want to feel. That's the biggest thing. That's what a relationship is, how you want to feel, not how it looks. It's how you want to feel. I think there is someone out there who will make you feel a perfect way. I don't think there's like only that there's that one person out there and you got to find them and, you know, hope life brings you together. I think there is a person, multiple people, and they might come in and out of your life at different times. Some might be temporary, some might be permanent. But I do believe that there is someone out there who will make you feel a perfect way. The catch, of course, is that you have to know what that looks like for yourself, or you have to have an idea, you have to have a desire to figure that out. So in that sense, absolutely. But I think, you know, to truly be like, this person is my soulmate, you have to have a high level of self-awareness. But yes, I do believe that.
I'm just curious, what do you think about a soulmate existing, but not in a romantic form? Like maybe a really good friend that's meant to be in your life for a specific reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the content I do is, you know, relationship driven, but it can definitely lend itself to more friendships or business partners or anything. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I think people are people. There's just a nuance there when it comes to relationships. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everyone, whether it's a temporary person or not, you can find purpose in their existence in your life. You just have to be willing to take a step back and look for it, or be aware enough to understand what it might be.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is a tremendous conversation. It's funny because you mention often like single is your superpower. I know that's one of your things, and I see so many people like they're scared or maybe even terrified to hold like personal space. Like they're petrified to be alone. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, well, I think the deeper answer would be something attachment style related. But I don't tend to focus on that. I tend to focus on societal pressure we've put on ourselves. I think that's the real reason we treat singleness with such a stigma towards ourselves, is we judge ourselves. We think society's judging ourselves. We think a lot of the times that single is a representation of lack, of something being wrong with you. And I understand that, certainly. And I think there's something that only I can be empathetic towards, which is it's different for women than it is for men. There's a biological element. There is a societal construct that places more judgment on that. And I wish I could do something about that, but I can't. But what I can do, and what I do talk a lot about, is that the power of the pressure we put on ourselves, or lack thereof. That is something we could always control. My whole thing with single is your superpower is, yes, I could go down the trope of talking about how being single is a time in your life where you can love yourself and practice what you preach and do all these things. And I think, yes, I think in my life, the time I've spent being single has been revolutionary, has been amazing.
Evolutionary.
You know, there's no time like it in your life. And I wish more women would understand that. And I'm sure they do, but then you've got pressure, and you've got your parents. Why aren't you married? You've got your friends. And I totally get it. One of the things that I always do, and I always mention it on podcasts, so if you've heard it before, but I love asking older generations what they regret in life, just like a little thing I do. And I've heard so many great answers, powerful answers. I've never heard an older generation say, I regret being single. I've never heard it. Anything relationship driven as a regret is something along the lines of, I regret being in this certain relationship. I regret staying in a relationship. I regret jumping into a relationship. Literally the opposite of being single. So I think of all the things you might regret in life, being single isn't one of them. And it takes a strong person to zoom out and say that, because in the moment it's overwhelming. It feels very bad. It makes you feel insecure, but you got to sometimes zoom out and realize you've got some time on your hands. And if you believe in what you have to offer, and you believe in soulmates or whatever it may be, then you believe you will find that person. And the time between now and then is a time that you can make the most of and enjoy, because ultimately that's not one of the things you're going to regret. And for me, that's always been helpful. Like, my whole thing, sounds weird, is my purpose in a sense is to avoid regret in life, because I think that is what will make me happy. And I think being single is not one of those things, certainly, in any sense.
Yeah. Bang. This is awesome. And it's so true, Case, because like, my personal opinion is as follows. Like, when you're single, you have an opportunity to work on yourself, right? Because you don't have to like worry so much about a partner. And then you're able to really grow. And it's in these times when you can become a better version of yourself and then attract a better person to the better version of you. For example, like, the person that I was years back when I was in a toxic relationship, like, that wasn't the best version of me. I'm just being honest. But when I became single and I started working on myself and becoming better and better, and let me be clear, like, I'm still under construction. I believe we all are. But then I was able to attract somebody really great that I definitely would not have attracted years back. So for the audience listening, like, if you are single, like, use that time to work on yourself, because that's priceless. And that will actually help facilitate you attracting someone to your higher self.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the cliche thing to say that it's a time to work on yourself, but it is like so crucial. Like, I really do think we underestimate the importance of loving ourselves. Certainly. I mean, that's the backbone of everything that I represent. But if you don't love yourself, if you don't know what it means to love yourself, how can you expect to show people what that looks like for them? Like, we have to establish that standard for ourselves. And that standard is established when you're single, when you're dating, when you're going on bad dates, when you're being ghosted, like all the negative things that we associate with reflection of lack. I see it all as a reflection of gain, because I mean, the reality is there's the quote that I love. That's like, if you erase the mistakes of your past, you erase the wisdom of your present. And it's like a tough pill to swallow, but it's like, you need mistakes in life. You need the opposite of what you want in life. Because if you don't have the opposite, how do you truly know what it is that you want? Like, if you've never failed, how do you know what success is? If you've never like not been loved, how do you know what love is? Like, we need the opposite of those things. And I always try to say things in like the least like patronizing way, because sometimes it's like, oh, okay, well, that's an easy way to reconcile things, but it really is true. Like, until you've experienced the opposite of what you want, you might not truly know what it is that you want. I do this whole bit on the difference between being picky and being selective, is what I call it. But, I think there's this tendency as we get older, being like, oh, maybe I'm too picky. Maybe I'm too picky. Maybe that's why I've had issues in relationships. Maybe that's why I haven't had success. And I always say it's a very easy thing to prove to yourself that you're not being too picky. And the easy answer is you look back and you say, okay, here's the standard that I'm afraid is too picky. If you could look back in your past and you had an experience that showed you why that's important to you, you're not picky. You have an experience that proved something to you. And that's very different. Someone who might be picky might be like, they read every dating article and they just borrow everything. And they're like, I need this, like, and you're just borrowing all these things. And I think it's great to be inspired. But what makes a standard real and worth holding on to is that you could look in your life and you say, I had this experience. And that is why this standard is firm in my life, because I learned the opposite of it through this experience. Like, experiences are the ultimate like exclamation mark on your standards. And that is what always makes something real and not, just fairy dust, rhetoric. It's, you have an experience and there's a power in the experience because it gave you that standard. And I think sometimes we lose track of that, particularly as we get older, and maybe as a woman and you're single and you're like, oh my gosh, like, time is not on my side. Like, this is, I gotta move. And that's how you lower your standard. But I think we got to look back to look forward. And there's a lot of power in remembering that.
Yes. Amen, brother. This is fantastic stuff. And it's so valuable. And this is stuff like that people need to hear straight up. I see so many people stuck, which essentially is a choice, in a toxic relationship where, like, to the naked eye, it's so obvious that that's not a good fit. And like, that story is not going to have a happy ending, but they can't seem to get out of it. Why is that?
Yeah, I keep coming back to the same thing. Well, I think a lot of it is conditioning, for one. Some of our attachment styles are related to what's not given to us. I mean, there's a whole bunch of science that You know, as a just a dude, I don't really tend to touch the science, but there's a lot of science around you know, the way that your brain reacts to emotional withholding. Like people who purposely give you a little and then back up, it does some weird stuff to the brain where it really tricks you into sticking around because you want that hit. You get a little and then they pull back, and so you go forward and they pull back, and it becomes this whole song and dance, and that's rooted in some deep, more psychological elements. So I think it's important to realize that. You know, I think a lot of times it comes down to, you know, in a toxic relationship, in a one-sided relationship, in a, you know, an immature relationship, there's a lot of chasing, there's a lot of convincing, there's a lot of you know, you taking a look at your life, and, you know, to our whole conversation, you think you're getting older and you're like, well, I can't start over now. Starting over now would be embarrassing. I've already introduced this guy to all my friends. I can't start over. There's thoughts of that. There's thoughts of biological clock. I can't start over because I'm getting older. There's things like that. And, you know, there's, you know, I say it's great to be hopeful, but sometimes that hope deludes us. We think, well, he or she will change. Will they? Do they want to? I mean, there's so many things that we could go through to address that there. But I think ultimately it does come down to whatever the toxicness of the relationship is. There is an element of chasing, that there is an element of convincing. That is, you're convincing them, you're convincing yourself, you're doing the opposite of what we refer to as attracting, but we're not being fully real with ourselves. I mean, the question that I always encourage people to ask themselves, that is a pretty eye-opening question, is something along the lines of, if nothing were to change today, is this good enough for me? And of course, every relationship and every person has the ability to improve. But I think at the core, if you're answering that question and you're like, well, no, you know, then you gotta do what's best for you. And that's action. And that's always the most difficult step. But if nothing were to change today, you know, would this be enough for me? I think if you're truly in a toxic relationship, you should be saying, you know, no. And if that's your answer, then, you know what to do. But again, it's tough. It's all balance.
Yeah, and you mentioned like deep psychological stuff, and I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. There was an old analogy. I forget who told me this. Like, it's like the slot machine one. Like when you're in a toxic relationship, like you keep pulling the lever and you keep losing, and then on the 20th try, you win.
Yeah.
Like you don't even break even. You just get a little bit higher, and then you're like, oh, the person's going to change. There is a good side to them, and then it's the same cycle. Next thing you know, it's 15 years later.
Yeah, so that's exactly it, and that's tough. That's why it's so tough. And especially if you're an empathetic person, you know, you do a lot of things like, well, you're like, well, I understand that there's an issue, but he or she, like, they're working on it. They want to change. I'm here to help them. And, you know, your empathy can be an enemy in that case, because you're like, the moment that you have a thought of, you're like, well, maybe this isn't good enough for me, you start to think, well, that's selfish. I'm being selfish. I can't abandon this person. Yeah. So I think everything is a balance. Like you got to give, and you got to help, and you got to heal, and you got to forgive. But ultimately, if there's no movement and there's no incentive on there, and if they don't want to change, then, you know, life is filled with tough decisions, and tough decisions are ones that are going to pay off in the long run, but you have to respect them. Otherwise, to my whole thing is, you're going to look back and you're going to regret it. And I think we're all capable of living a life where we minimize regret, but it's filled with tough decisions. It's filled with awkward conversations. It's filled with all those things that we are wired to avoid because we don't want them. But I've realized, you know, after for quite some time, I say my early mid 20s, being very resistant to those things. It's, you know, the ROI on an awkward conversation is insane, and I'll take that all day.
Hell yeah. Yeah, this is awesome. It's interesting. I started sprinkling in a little bit of sex content on some of my stuff, and it's such a big hit, brother. And it's like, why should sex be so taboo? Like, it's a part of life. Like, how do you think we got here in the first place? I'm curious. Do you dabble with that with some of your content?
I've done a couple episodes, less, you know, tactical, more talking. I mean, more talking about literally, you know, about like showing what you want, like communication, tight topics. And also like, you know, I've done episodes, I called one your hoe phase, where it's like, yeah, go out, have a ton of sex, have fun, like do your thing, like be safe. But yeah, it is weird how sometimes we make that such a taboo to the extent where it becomes this like deep, dark incentive that story and narrative where it really like detracts from the rest of our lives. So I don't do a whole lot of sex content. But I think it's definitely a subject worth talking about, because I mean, there's a very motivating force in life. Let's be real. Yeah. And if we're ignoring it and we're not bringing it up and we're not talking about what we want, we're not being honest, there's regret for you. So I think it's a great topic.
100%. And it's interesting because like, I'll be straight up with you. I've never publicly talked about this, but this seems like the conversation to have it. Like in years past, like in regards to sex, like I would get a little bit bored after a little bit of time, and that's just 100% transparency. I think that's pretty normal for most people. It's like the law of diminishing returns. But with my new partner, like even after a year, like it just keeps getting better, and I'm even more excited every single time. And there's got to be something to be said about that. Like when you're with the right person, it's not just physical when it comes to sex. Like there's an attraction like to the soul, and it's just on a deep level.
Absolutely. I mean, that's great to hear. I mean, I think there's a ton of things at play there. I mean, I'm sure communication plays a big role because you're understanding the connection between the physical and the emotional and the spiritual. And there's like so many layers to that. I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, you could talk about things like pornography, and you could talk about things, things like that play a big role. I've done recently a couple episodes on like men and, narratives and masculinity, and, I'm kind of eager to do more episodes like that are just real talk, the stuff that maybe we don't talk about because it's a little more uncomfortable, but it's totally true. And it's a weird thing, because I've heard what you said before, and I've definitely experienced that. And I have a lot of guy friends who say that. They're like, kind of the attraction isn't there anymore. And it's a question of, well, is it? Or is something not being addressed? Is there a missing piece of the puzzle? Are we not talking about it in the way that we should? It's probably more that than it's just gone. Like I struggle to believe that. So I think there's a lot there.
Yeah, this is great, buddy. This is some pretty deep stuff. And I never publicly, like, now I'm just a different person now. Like I'm working on myself every day. And like, it's liberating to have a conversation like this, like in regards to sex and stuff. Like for the audience, it shouldn't be taboo. Like it's a big part of our life. And we're talking about it for the right reasons. Dating apps.
It's only, I'll just gonna say it's only taboo if you make it taboo. It's like I always say, it's only awkward if you make it awkward. If you keep saying something's gonna be awkward, it's going to be awkward until you just do it and realize it's not awkward. Same with conversations like that. So totally.
Hell yeah. In regards to dating apps, it's funny, right? Because like, that's the new norm. It's almost like it's interesting or comical to think back, like what it was like back in the day before dating. We just went to a bar and met someone, whatever the case would be. I'm just curious, like your stance and your opinion on dating apps.
I think they're fantastic. Personally, I really do. I really don't like this whole narrative of dating apps have killed romance and this and that. It's like, yes, it has changed, but it's not dating apps. It's the culture we live in. It's the technology-driven culture we live in. And yes, there are bad seeds on dating apps. Yes, you're going to have some bad experiences. Yes, you're going to start thinking people are flaky. Yes, I agree. But when presented with the reality of dating, if you are someone and you want to go on dates and you want to meet someone, there is no better place than to do that. If you want to get your numbers up, we're talking sex, or we're talking dates, or we're talking meeting new people. Experiences. There is no better platform to go to. You got to go fishing where the fish are. In that sense, I think it's great. Once you're there, once you're fishing, there are all kinds of problems, of course. Are people being honest? Are you being catfished? Are people being genuine with what they say they're looking for? Safety. There's all these things to pay attention to, but I think those are all easily addressable. I truly do. I've done many episodes on what to ask on a first date. Ask these 2 questions and you're going to get some clarity.
Which questions?
They're very simple questions. Maybe not the first date questions, but first date questions. I mean, I get so many DMs from people, and most of them are women, around the subject of, hey, I've gone out with this guy a couple times. He seems great. He seems into me, but I don't know what he's looking for. And I'm like, well, have you asked him? And the response always is, and they're not, bad people. They're just like, well, no, because I don't want to seem crazy or clingy. I'm like, man, there is the problem with society, that asking a clarifying question it comes off as needy. And I hate that so much. But I can't control that. But I think back in my 20s and 30s when I was dating, the first question out of my mouth, a man, is, hey, so what are you looking for? Delivered in a casual way, I think is number one question to ask on a first date. What are you looking for? What are you doing here? Anyone who's scared off by that question is not for you. Anyone who judges you based on that question is not for you. So I always say, ask that. One of the deeper questions I always encourage people to ask, maybe not on a first date, but you say, what are you looking for? They answer. If they can't answer that question, or if they avoid it, well, I think you've got a pretty clear answer. If they avoid it, well, then they're probably not being honest.
That is an
If they don't
answer.
have a great answer, if they don't have a great answer, then they probably haven't thought about it, which it doesn't make them a bad person, but that's concerning. My whole thing is you have to date with intention. I am dating to XYZ. It doesn't matter if the answer is I am dating to have sex. Great answer. At least you're honest. But if you're being like, I don't really know what I'm doing, it's just not a great scenario. It's very ambiguous. You're gonna end up hurting yourself, hurt other people. Just have a strong answer. So if they don't have an answer at all, it's probably because they haven't thought about it. And I would think that you would want to date someone who knows why they're on a date with you. The follow-up question I always encourage people to ask, maybe on date 2 or date 3, where you've established a connection, is, okay, so I know what you're looking for. Well, what does that look like to you? If a guy says, oh, I'm dating because I want to find a wife. Great. Well, what does that look like? I think that's a very powerful question. Because again, if someone can't answer that, if they're like, oh, well, I don't really know. It's like, well, you haven't thought about it? Like, what does that look like? Someone who supports you, someone who understands your lifestyle, whatever it may be, at least be able to verbalize it a little. So I encourage people to ask those questions, not as put them on the spot and, bust, you try to, get them to mess up, but just to see where their head's at. Have they thought about this? Are they being honest about it? I think you could learn a lot through just some very simple, those are light questions. Nothing, you're not asking about your childhood trauma. You're saying, hey, what are you looking for? What does that look like? Cool. Yeah. All right. Want another drink? Let's get another drink. You can keep it casual.
Yeah, it's so true. Like spoiler alert, we're not going to be here forever, right? If you meet up with somebody and you're looking to find someone and settle down, but the other person's just looking to have a good time, probably not the best match, but that's okay. But let's just be honest and communicate. Have a good night, and maybe you don't see them again, or whatever the case may be. But otherwise, you're going to drive yourself crazy, wondering what does this person want. Just be upfront. You can live with that.
That's it. I mean, that's literally it. I think we could save ourselves so much undue anxiety by having those awkward conversations. I don't see why they're awkward, but whatever it is, awkward conversations. That way, you don't leave with, I don't know. My background is sales. I ran a technology sales team for 8 years in Chicago. If you ever left a meeting without next steps, you failed. You massively failed. It's the same thing with dating, not next steps as in when are we going out again, but clarity. Here's the client, here's their need, here's what I have to offer. Are they interested or not? You never leave a meeting without that, even if it's an introductory meeting. I'm not trying to say dating is like business, but it's the same amount of intention and clarity. You shouldn't leave a date without that. Why not?
Yeah.
You're doing because you're only hurting yourself. We talk about what feels good and what doesn't. Does it feel good to leave a date and be like, I don't know, versus leave a date and be like, oh, I'm so excited that their answer was this, or I'm bummed that their answer is this, but now I can move on. Yeah. That will always feel better than living in ambiguity. I call it living in the gray of life. I don't want to live in the gray. I would rather know yes or no, so I can move on with my life.
Life's too short, brother. This is straight up awesome. What about these rules and when can I text the person, or can the girl reach out first? What are your thoughts about that?
Ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's all I have to say. No, I mean, I think it's fine to have some rules. I think it's fine to, be inspired by other people's perspectives. And, I think it's fine. I would never judge anyone for being I don't want to be the first to reach out because I don't want to seem eager. But I think you come to realize at a certain point that those kinds of things are only holding you back. Because honestly, if you do everything we're describing now, those aren't a question, because you've established honesty. You've established open conversation. So texting, triple texting too early, it's not a thing, because hopefully you have an indication of, of intention and honesty. And, things like don't sleep with someone on the first date. Okay, well, don't, or do whatever. But again, it's your intention. You are the one deciding. If you're out there and you're just dating for fun, sleep with them on the first date. Why not? If you're dating and you're dating to date someone seriously, you could also sleep with them on the first date. I know so many people who slept together on the first date are happily married. You know, I know people who also didn't sleep together on a first date and broke up. There's no blueprint. And I think that that's really empowering. I like the fact that, especially in this day and age, you can meet any which way. I think the timeline for a relationship has totally been thrown out the window. It's just different. So I think it's, if you approach dating with awareness and intention as the ultimate, and you refuse to leave a situation without checking those boxes, there's not going to be any, oh, did I follow this rule or should I do this? Because you're operating from that place from the get-go. You're operating with clarity.
Yeah, this reminds me of something that you often say. There's no right way to live your life.
Yeah, when you set me up for my soundbite there. That's my soundbite. That's what man, that's great. You know my stuff. Yeah, no, the soundbite that I always give is there's no right way to live your life, but there is a wrong way. And the wrong way is to think that there's a right way. Everything we're saying, like, because I think a lot of times, like, if you're single, like for instance, when I was single in my late 20s and I lived downtown in Chicago, and I would go out to the clubs and I'd be like, yo, that dude there, he's single, he's baller, he's buying bottles, he's confident, he's got a roster of women. That is what being single is for a man. I need to do that. And that is the right way. If I'm not him, I'm not being a good single guy. I'm not taking advantage of being single. Or the opposite, in a relationship, that is couple goals. I need to be like them with my girlfriend. And if I'm not, then it means I don't have a great relationship. And that's how we end up backing ourselves into corners. That's how we end up thinking that being single is this or that, is we think that there's a right way. We think that there's a version of success, happiness, fulfillment. And if we don't figure out how they did it, we'll never be able to do it for ourselves. And it's cliche to say, but there really is no right way to do anything. There's no right way to be single. There's no right way to be in a relationship. There's no right way to be divorced. There's no right way to start a business. I make a living from sharing my feelings on the internet. Truthfully, that's literally what I do. If you asked me that 10 years ago when I was version 1.0 of Case, I would have laughed at that. I would have said, that is definitely not the right way. But we live in a crazy era.
Crazy.
Both creatively and purposely and relationship wise. There really is no right way. And I think once we realize that, it's very liberating, because we stop judging ourselves for not following other people's timelines. I could talk all day about comparing ourselves, but we set ourselves free when we realize there's no right way, but there is kind of a wrong way. And that's to assume that someone else has the right way and we need to emulate them to get it.
Bang. The only negative that I got going on right now is we don't have 10 hours to chat. One of the words that you just mentioned as you were speaking is you used the word cliche. And I just want to say for the audience, like, if you guys aren't familiar with Case, like, please, if you think what I have to say is credible, go check out his content immediately. One of the things that you do so well is you often drop these quotes, and it's like, it's not like rocket science, but they're so powerful.
Yes. Right.
And I know you love cliches and stuff like that.
Yes. Yes.
What about those gets you so excited?
It's so funny. I don't know what my thing is with certain words and things, but yeah, because I think it used to be like, I used to think cliches were stupid. I'd see an inspirational quote and be like, man, that's stupid. Like, obviously, thank you, Captain Obvious. Like, I kind of had a very cynical approach to these things. The thing we talk about, back to the beginning of our conversation, I think we are all hardwired to be empathetic, compassionate, hopeful people, and then life gets in the way. And it's the same with these cliches. A cliche is just an obvious life truth, something that we know is obvious. But do you know how many obvious things we know that we don't act on? Do you know how many times we know what to do, but we do the opposite? Do you know how many times we give our friends great advice, but then we turn around and do the opposite? All day, every day. We are acutely aware of what is true and what is not, what is right and what is wrong, what feels good and what doesn't feel good. Like, we all day, but we ignore it because we're humans. So I think it's my job to remind people of the cliches that are true, but maybe give a little razzle dazzle so we can remember it in a way. My whole thing when I do mindfulness is, there's two kinds of mindfulness. There's one that's more like spiritual. It's more like ethereal. It's believing in things you can't really see. I think that's great. My kind of mindfulness is logic driven. I can see this, therefore I believe this. I've had this experience, therefore I know this to be true. Like a lawyer, it's like mindfulness for lawyers. You got exhibit A, therefore you've got conclusion A. Like, that's what I love in life. And so I love taking cliche and prove it. How do you prove something? You look at your life through the power of observation. And I think there's something that just makes it stick. I don't know about you, but in my life, if I've seen something, I can prove something else. And that's much easier for me than being like, well, I kind of believe it. Why not? It's like, no, I could prove it. And here's why. And here's why I'm not going to quit. And here's why this is my standard. And here's why I know what I bring to the table. And here's why I believe this. Like, it's based on observation and logic, and it sticks and it works. But I do love cliches.
Yeah, I know you do, brother. What excites me most about this conversation is it's just the beginning of the friendship. I'm going to be in Chicago in October to run the Chicago Marathon. Curious, you coming out to New York anytime soon?
I need to. And now that things are like hopefully a little normal, I'm definitely going to be out there. So I'll definitely let you know.
Okay. Yeah, we'll exchange numbers.
And let me know when you're here.
I definitely will, brother. I definitely want to build the friendship. This was an awesome conversation. Straight up, it was different, but this is stuff people need to hear. And sometimes, like, we know the answers, but we need to hear it from someone else to realize. And I know that because I've been there. With all the cool, exciting things that you have going on right now, what's the best way for the audience to support you?
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, the podcast is New Mindset Who Dis. My Instagram is Case Kenny. I do sell journals, newmindsetwhodis.com. That's my main business. I also just started a YouTube channel. If people want to, I spent years hiding behind the mic. I figured do a little video. So started that this month. It's been pretty fun. But Case Kenny, if you just Google Case Kenny or New Mindset Who Dis, you'll be able to find all the great things I've got going on. But it means a lot. So
awesome. How can I personally support you, brother?
Oh, this is it. This is great. You're giving me a platform. You're giving me other people who maybe could hear what I have to say, and it might help them. So you've done it twice. You've given me 2 W's that I didn't have before. So I appreciate
awesome.
that.
That's the best comment I could receive. For the audience listening, if you guys love the conversation, take a screenshot of it, post it, tag Case and I. This is too much fun, brother. And we're definitely going to do something else in the future for sure. I want you to know you're the definition of mindfulness, self-awareness, and heart, from taking your life experience to creating a one-of-a-kind relationship and dating conglomerate. You're a true entrepreneur, visionary, role model, and beacon of hope for anyone coming up today with big goals and aspirations. I can personally guarantee your best is yet to come. Keep on spreading your wings and leaving your mark on this world. So much love and respect for you. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping these priceless nuggets today, Case.
Oof. Well, thank you, man. That means a lot, seriously. So thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, brother. Too much fun.
That was great, man. That time flew.
Yeah, it did. It did. It was a great conversation. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Great interview, man. Yeah, I do a lot of interviews and some of them are not great, but this was fabulous. So
yeah.